Hey girl, what you gonna do tonight? I've got my mama's car keys and you've got a ticket to ride.
Hello, and welcome to Your Favorite Flick, a podcast where each episode we celebrate a movie that my guest loves. We aren't here to be critics, we're here to be fans. For today's episode, we are joined by Paul Sparacello. Paul is a numbers whiz and one of the best chess players I know, but he's also something of a Luddite, so I'm glad he got his computer turned on and mic working for this one. I kid Paul, so I don't have to admit that he's smarter than me. We're talking about An American Werewolf in London, the 1981 horror comedy, or maybe comedy horror, directed by John Landis with creative work by a young Rick Baker. We discuss the horror and comedy convergence, the revolutionary makeup effects, the monster as anti-hero, and the criminally underrated Griffin Dunn. Hope you'll have a howling good time. Sorry, that was terrible. Let's just have fun. Paul Sparacello, welcome to the show, man. Why don't you let the audience know what movie are we here to talk about today?
Thanks, Brad. So we're going to talk about a old movie, one of my favorites, American Werewolf in London. Figured people are covering some new movies. I'll cover one from a while back. A lot of good memories of.
Before we get into the movie itself, can you tell us a little bit about yourself as a movie fan? When do you remember getting into movies?
So I've always really loved movies from a young kid. I like a lot of kids of our generation. When the VCR was first introduced for the household, it was an element of like you had this control over able to watch what you wanted. And at the time, they were kind of special because we only had like a few movies. To have it, those movies you could watch and you could, when you try, that control was just really cool for me. I started getting in more, I guess, more in high school, started watching different genres of movies, took a few film classes in college, but just kind of across the board, I like all different genres from everything from A to Z. Just a lifelong movie buff and fun to talk about and fun to watch.
What about now? I know you've got kids and a lot of responsibilities. How much time do you find for movies these days?
Not at all. And that's why I'm reviewing old movies because those are the ones that I've watched. Now, I feel bad about that because there's a lot of good movies that are more recent. But everything has been done before. There's so much good old movies that go watch an old movie. They're fun. So that's trying to remind people to watch some of the older ones.
I appreciate that. I just like people watching movies, unless they're absolutely terrible ones. Just, watch movies.
Even the bad ones can be very good at times. So
can you give anyone who hasn't seen this movie, I don't know why they wouldn't have seen this movie.
Yeah.
They're frankly sleeping on a classic. But can you give anyone who hasn't seen it a quick overview of what the movie's about?
Well, in one sense, it's your basic slasher werewolf movie. So guy goes out into the world, becomes a werewolf, not by his own choice, of course. He and his buddy backpacking across Europe. The buddy is killed by a werewolf. Surprise. He becomes a werewolf. The rest of the movie is his story of trying to both realize what he is, solve his problem somehow, and then coming to a conclusion. But you think it's just a horror movie, but it's kind of equal parts comedy and horror movie. And where a lot of movies are doing one or while kind of mocking the other, this one's kind of true to both comedy and horror. So one of the things I like about it.
I have to admit, I'm not as well versed in horror as in some genres, but for my money, it serves both those masters as well as any movie I've ever seen.
You think of a lot of the movies where they kind of play in both genres. Think of like the Young Frankenstein or something. It's really a comedy mocking a horror. Not mocking, but playing on a horror for humor. This is not doing that. It's not making fun of the werewolf tropes. It's fully embracing them and making a true horror movie while making a comedy at the same time.
I hadn't necessarily thought about it from the framework of embodying the tropes, but it very much is. It's grabbing those things that make werewolf movies great.
Because again, it is taking the basic transformation, all the little steps. It's not making fun of them. It's embracing old Hammer werewolf movies of the 50s and 60s, but it's following those progressions. But then it's also a comedy is playing out at the same time, which is kind of a neat part about it.
I'm so glad you mentioned those Hammer movies early. I think one thing great here is that it's playing on both those Hammer movies, which for those in
Oh
the
yeah.
audience that don't know are English movies, but also American horror movies,
Oh
also
yeah.
kind of the old Universal classics.
Oh, absolutely. Obviously, they're playing those same tropes, and obviously, you think back to horror movies even later, where Jaws was the first one where you don't really show the monster. It's like, no, there were short budget movies way before where they didn't have the technology in the 50s and 60s, so the camera is always turned back in the scary scenes to the main protagonists because they couldn't create a monster well enough. Even in this one, where the transformation themes are pretty good, in this movie, all the very short scenes with the werewolf are kind of suspect, and you were basically in the same way the Hammer movies did, and a lot of the older ones too. The character you rely on for the fear, not for the monster.
I think one of this one's, and I'll say innovation. I don't know if it's necessarily the first, but the wolf's eye view of this movie, where we get those scenes from the perspective of the wolf, is a great way of working
Yeah,
that, of using that as an advantage.
absolutely. And it's also the other part that where the story is turned around is you are the anti-hero. He is the bad guy in this. He is the monster killing people. But you're rooting for him all along the time, not to kill people, obviously, but for his redemption.
That's a great point. In this movie, the traditional protagonist and the monster are the same person.
What's weird is even in those scenes where he's the person you're rooting for, it's still this frightening scene. Once he transforms after he becomes a werewolf on the next full moon, he goes through ripping up London, killing a bunch of innocent people. You're still kind of scared, but then you're still kind of like rooting for him to get away. So it really kind of pulls at you in both directions in a pretty powerful way, which another kind of strong point of the movie.
No doubt about that. If you remember, when did you first see this movie?
So actually, that's the other reason I really love this movie. And back to the control of having videos. When I was in college, I had lived with a roommate, and he was moving out, and we were canceling cable, and I only had a few VCR tapes, and this was one of them. So it would be kind of my late night movie that I would watch pretty regularly because I only had, at the time, he had taken most of the other movies from our apartment. So I had like 5 or 6 movies, and it was a pretty good late night movie when you'd come back home from doing whatever. So I probably watched this movie, I don't know how many times, but it had just this strong resonance for me that I still got something out of it watching it over and over, both from the humor and there's the ambiance of the movie.
Is that around the time you first saw it, or did you see it when you were younger?
I think I saw it first in I saw bits and pieces in high school, but I think my real memory of it was watching it in college.
So I first saw it when I was living with my buddy Matt in that tiny little apartment off Carrollton, which is actually the first time that I know we met and talked. We
Yeah.
ran through the same circles. I think we may have met before that, but
Yeah.
that's like the first time I remember us really talking.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. So it all comes back to American Wolf in London. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. So one of the things that's most famous about this movie is, and you already kind of mentioned the transformation, but the makeup and the effects in general. And I'm wondering how much that factors into your love of the movie. Kind of how do you feel about them?
Oh, yeah. I think I would love the movie even aside from that, but especially given that John Landis, the director prior to this, was basically making not very special effect, definitely not special effects heavy or ambitious movies. And he really went out on a ledge and really had the transformation scene is was really kind of groundbreaking for when it happened. So it's a great scene. And if you watch it now, even though some of the other stuff with the full bore werewolf scenes are not don't hold up as well, that transformation scene still I think holds up very well even today. So incredible job of what they did and just an incredible scene.
It's just such a visceral piece of
Oh yeah.
filmmaking. Now, one thing I'm enjoying about this show is I'm watching more movies without second screening, but that is one of those
Yeah.
scenes that even if you are second screening,
Oh
you're
yeah.
putting down the phone.
And not just the innovation of what they were able to accomplish with the special effects, it's a deeply personal scene because, again, it's still your protagonist who, for most of the scene, is still very visibly recognizable, and you're still empathizing with him. Don't become the monster. Obviously, he doesn't want to become the monster, but it really resonates on that emotional level too, beyond just being a good special effects. So the setup within the story is good, and then the special effects is really strong too. So it's really just a great scene.
I'm so glad you called that out. To extend on it a little bit, we hear him and see him in anguish over it.
Oh yeah.
So it's not a powerful transformation.
I mean, he's really kind of laying himself bare, and it's a painful process, but you're empathizing with him, and throughout the whole movie, even when he is killing people, you are still empathizing with him, which was still a very powerful thing that they're able to set up in the movie that I'm very impressed by.
And you make a great point there about Landis. Like, he had done the Blues Brothers before this, which is ambitious in its own way as an action movie, but it's a lot of static shots. It's a lot of wides. This is really ambitious filmmaking.
Oh yeah. Back to when you talk about the shots, and I mean the special effects are incredible, but the early part of the movie does actually have a lot of those like trailing hammer shots where like you get those like little like kind of wonky vistas of a moor and stuff. And I just felt like a lot of those shots he was trying to like do a little homage at the beginning. And I didn't really understand at the time because in college I had not seen many Hammer films. But now if you go back and watch it, you can kind of see a little more of that.
One thing I hear in that I relate to is that things that are done for homage like that, if they're done well, often it makes the emotional impact, even if you don't yet know the predecessor movies, if that makes sense.
I couldn't agree more. It's the atmosphere that they were going for. Like a lot of things, there are a lot of timeless ideas, and I think those setups of those shots to create the suspense and the both the mystery and the foreboding, it's just those are classic framings that will always work. And so it's both homage and then it's just going with a good formula that works for the genre.
I I remember I was thinking about this watching it today. I remember the first time I saw the Wicker Man, the original Wicker Man,
Oh yeah, yeah,
af-
yeah.
after this and seeing the faces in the pub when he walks in, and I'm like, oh, that's where that came
Yeah.
from.
I think the scene that really draws you into the movie is that first pub scene. I just love that scene because it's both scary and foreboding that these people are not accepting and they're doing something nefarious and I don't quite understand it. Back to it is beat two movies at once. Then it becomes a little yuck it up comedy. Like he throws at his joke and then it clips back into it with the dartboards shot. But again, it's foretelling like, here's the movie we're going to be. It's like, we're setting up the foreboding shot. We're giving you the anxiety, but hey, we got a little comedy for you too. So it's, I thought it was a great setup.
Something I think about with that scene and really the whole start of this movie, and it's not alone in this, many horror movies do this well, but we already know the name of the movie is An American Werewolf in London, right? So we know one of these guys is becoming a werewolf because otherwise, why would it be an American
Yeah,
werewolf? And so we know it's getting to London at some point, but that doesn't make it any less impactful at the beginning. Like we're still feeling that.
exactly. And like I said, the surprise is the journey, but you kind of know where we're going with this, but you don't know quite how you're going to get there. And obviously, the level of humor in it, I think that really makes it something different and very unique. Like that joke, it maybe didn't age too well, but it really set up the movie. I'm talking about the pub scene joke. It kind of defined what these guys are almost the werewolf watch of Northern England, but they got time to yuck it up at the pub too and make some good jokes.
So I know you're a big traveler, Paul. I don't know how much time you spent in London or England at large. What effect that might have on your perception of the movie now?
If I think of the back of my head why I liked it is even at the time I'd been to England a couple times and I really liked England, but I had not been to Northern England very much. And so that those early scenes of that like mysterious, you know, what's happening on the moors. I'd been to London before, but I think that was also an appealing part. Movies like this, they set up that mystery. Hey, there's this other world here that's something mysterious and interesting that's happening. So that part drew me in too, as well.
I have a feeling that, like me, you read your Sherlock Holmes as a kid. So just like going back
Absolutely.
to Hound of the Baskervilles, this
Sure.
idea of the Moors.
I mean, once you said that, that's really where it comes from, is those genre horror ones, like the guy's about to be killed, some mystery on the moors, and that foreboding kind of ominous atmosphere. Yeah, definitely draws in the back of your head.
An interesting element of the transformation is that it happens in full light, which is so unusual for a horror movie. I'm
Yeah.
interested in your thoughts on why.
So to flip it on its head, and also I think just to show we can do it. I think if you hide in the shadows, it's kind of a perspective of, oh, well, you're kind of covering for the deficiencies of your lack of technical acumen to make it visible. It was almost like, hey, look what we can do. Like, we're really good at this. We can really execute a great special effects. That's the way I read it. I don't know. Maybe there's another subtext to the light. I'm not sure.
So a couple of thoughts there. I mean, first of all, it's like they kind of discovered Rick Baker, who had been
Yeah,
a
yeah,
makeup assistant.
yeah. So that helps.
And it feels to me like Landis said, "Holy shit, this guy can do this! Like, let's really show it." But then I was thinking this based on some of what you had to say, is that it does kind of work thematically with that idea that our protagonist is also our antagonist.
Yes.
He's transforming in the light.
And again, that's one of the things that's kind of cool, is because in most movies you've got your classic protagonist and something he's working against, but it's him too. And that sets up a really interesting kind of me versus myself narrative. It's almost like him coming to terms with his own unfortunate realities.
I'm gonna feel really, kind of dumb admitting this, but the Jekyll and Hyde connection only just occurred to me in this moment
Oh,
with being
yeah.
London's set.
I'd sort of thought of it. The way you referenced like the Sherlock Holmes and On the Moors, somehow I feel like that even though the Jekyll and Hyde is right there, why is it that I don't feel like it really inspires this movie in the same way? But I don't feel it does. But I mean, it's right there in almost direct correlation. But maybe it's my own just not having kind of internalized that. But that's a good analogy.
Well, that lets me off the hook. I appreciate
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
Paul, because that means
We're
mine
we're in
just
the
thinking
same
of it.
boat then.
What about the soundtrack?
Oh, that is absolutely one of my favorite parts of the movie too. It's like the songs, and obviously different versions of the same song. I felt really accentuated scenes in an interesting way, and it's like Blue Moon. Obviously, it's different versions, different times, but really telling a different story with the same lyrics in an interesting way. So, love the soundtrack.
That's part of what I love is that it doesn't just seem random that they use 3 different versions, like, they really
Oh,
work where they are.
and sometimes an accentuation at an end, the exclamation point at the end, it actually reminds me a lot in the way of that hard stop at in Pulp Fiction, where you go from this very visceral, violent scene, and then pop to this like snappy tune that like jumps off, and so it really has that little like jump in, like whoa! It is an exclamation point on the movie. Very quick finish, but powerful at the same time.
So, this might be a little cart before the horse because I definitely wanna even get into some other parts, but that ending, like you're talking about, it just gets out. This movie hits its climax, and that's it, and I'm
Yeah.
wondering how that works for
No
you.
denouement. There's no what happens to her after or any follow up. It's like he is dead. Story over. Catchy song. Here we go.
There's part of me that wish, every movie was that way,
Yeah.
Frank. I think once you hit
Well,
your climax, get out of there quick.
well, and you can do different, and that's the great thing about the medium of movies. Like your story can do a lot of things. It's just like boom, that's our finish, and it is really a loud exclamation point that I think leaves the viewer with a very strong memory because it finishes so quickly. It's got that staccato at the end.
Absolutely, and what's interesting with that too from a timing standpoint, around what time in the movie do you think he turns into the wolf?
So the werewolf, that's a good point. I would say is probably 2/3 of the way through the movie.
You pretty much nailed it. It's almost exactly at the hour point that he turns into the wolf for
Okay,
the
yeah.
first time.
Yeah,
So
okay.
to put you on the spot there, only to say that's a fairly incredible thing. We have this
Yeah.
one early scene with the other wolf, but then we're just with them for 50 minutes.
I like the atmosphere that is a slow development movie. It is doing other things. It's not just a slasher movie. It's not just a werewolf movie. I mean, it is really kind of making you care about the character in a deep way, enough to where he's about to go rip up some people, but you're still rooting for him. So they got to set it up a little bit, I guess.
Absolutely. So we talked about the transformation, so we'll leave that on the table for this. But if I put you on the spot and asked you to name a favorite sequence in the movie, what would you go with and why?
I'll table the transformation, but reference it first that from a visual scene, I think one of the best humor scenes is, and just kind of what the movie is, and maybe it's a little hokey, but the interactions between both the main character and his dead friend, and even with the dead people he killed. He goes on a rampage, kills 5, 6 people through London. Then his friend brings him to this flophouse movie theater to confront the people he's murdered. And he's sort of feels bad about it, but kind of indignant at the same time. And it's just a great setup. And it's maybe a little hokey, but it's such a great scene. And then it sets up one of his little Easter eggs throughout his movies. See you next Wednesday. So the name of the
Right.
movie is See You Next Wednesday. But if you look through a lot of John Landis movies, he'll reference that in random places. So it's maybe a hokey scene, but I just love it because I think it kind of personifies the movie.
So the only thing I hate about you picking that is that's what I had down for mine as well. That is my
Okay.
single favorite part of
Yeah.
the movie. The fact that it's in a porn theater, that we've got
Yeah,
this
yeah, and
like,
it's like it's in the background. You hear like the everything going on. They're sort of cut to it every once in a while. It's great. It's great.
there's like what's on. I mean, even by porn standards, first of all, it's clearly something they made. It's not a real porn film,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
but like there's the thing: a guy comes in and like he's yelling at the woman, and she says, "I've never met you before in my life," and he says, "Oh, sorry," and leaves.
Yeah.
It's like it's just
It's still with
it's
the
so
comedy with
absurd.
it. It's still embracing like the hokey comedy with like we're still making jokes and making fun of another genre movie at the same time. It's great.
But within that scene too, there's the victims talking about the way he should kill himself and throwing
Yeah.
out like 10 different suicide
Yeah.
ideas.
Yeah, and again, we shouldn't be rooting for him. Like, we should be, they're the victims. He went and murdered all these people, but they're really being indignant and mean to him. And we don't like these. Like, somehow they set up the scene where you're still rooting for him, the murdering werewolf, not for the innocent people. That businessman was kind of rude to him. I don't like that businessman. You know?
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. But and like the other couple's kind of nice, but they're kind of
Yeah.
cloying too.
Yeah, yeah. And the
Um,
hobos, like they could be the Mortimer brothers or something in a different life. The other, to me, iconic, just crazy scene that puts the movie on his head is his lucid dream scene. Another one, like staccato, like just exclamation parts of just crazy. That this isn't just a comedy. This is diving into the disturbed nature of the person. So there's the dream sequence where he's sitting with his parents and having a nice evening, and then all of a sudden Nazi werewolves
Right.
break into his house with Uzis and just start murdering everybody. I'm like, that was not the way I thought this scene was going to end, but that's where they took it. So
I hadn't seen it in a few years, though I have seen it a number of times, and I had really kind of forgotten that scene until it was
it's
happening.
intense. It's an intense scene. Oh,
I really had a moment of like, oh, I didn't remember that he went back home in the interim, and it's
Yeah.
and there's a brilliant little start to that scene where they're watching the Muppet Show.
Yes. Punch and
And
Judy.
there's-
Exactly.
Yeah, the Punch of Judy is so perfectly symbolic, but also it very quickly tells you we're back in America,
That's a good
we're
point.
likely back in America.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if those monsters are even werewolves or just if they said, hey, Rick Baker, come up with some stuff.
Yeah. They look like Nazi werewolves to me. That's what was in my head.
Works for me. Just because I don't want to miss this. So you mentioned Griffin Dunn as the friend Jack who was killed early on. That's probably my favorite performance in the movie. I'm interested to know what are your favorite
Uh,
performances?
well, I think far and away, he's both the best performance and just the best actor in the film. I mean, Jenny Otter, she's had some big roles in Logan's Run, I think, and she's good in it. And the main character, he's pretty straight laced, kind of a vanilla, but Griffin Dunn, I just like in anything he is. He's just such a kind of underappreciated actor in general. As the dead friend, he's really great in this movie. And actually, I like the doctor. The doctor is somehow, I really like his performance as the doctor. Just the uptight British, you know, sort of nobility character. But yeah, Griffin Dunn still takes the cake, I think.
There was a time that I was not crazy about David Naughton's lead performance, but as I've seen more of like the predecessor movies, I think he very much knows the movie he's in and is
Yeah.
performing to that movie.
It's straight and understated, but he does make you care about the character. And that's not just the setup of the director and the script. It also has to be part and part. The actor is bringing you there too. So, to your point, maybe I don't give him quite enough justice in making that empathy happen.
Because we could maybe call that one a slight quibble. Are there things about the movie that don't work for you? Anything that you feel like doesn't hold up well, or maybe just wasn't as great from the start?
Well, I mean, there's a few side scenes where they show the actual werewolf. Very small scenes, but oh, that looks kind of goofy. That doesn't look right. Like the businessman's going up the escalator, you can see the werewolf sort of like squattily coming out. So, as great as some of the special effects are, there are some limitations on what they could accomplish with the broader character of the werewolf. So those didn't age as well. Some of the jokes fall flat just as being overly hokey, but it's in the nature of the comedy. It's like in a boxing match. Not every punch is going to land, but they land at a pretty high rate. So I got no complaints from that.
This isn't a big criticism. It would be funny to cut anything from a movie this short because it runs like 95 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
The police stuff I could kind of take or leave. Like I don't
Yeah.
think they add a lot.
Maybe the one scene, and I wouldn't want to cut because Frank Oz is in the movie, and his scene, it's meant to be awkward, but it's almost awkward to the point of being, well, are they being serious here? So, yeah, maybe Frank, yeah, because Frank Oz comes in as the envoy or someone from the consulate that comes in to interview him or something, and yeah, kind of an awkward scene. So maybe the Frank Oz scenes. I mean, I feel bad saying that because I like Frank Oz, but
He's got a weird energy in that scene that I could see
it,
like either working or not working for you.
It's
I'm
I
so
didn't
enamored.
think it didn't come across right, I don't think, but, it's me.
I'm probably just so in the bag for Frank Oz. I mean, the man's Yoda that I like the
That's
scene.
I was gonna say, it brings that Yoda resonance because you hear the voice, and even though it's a different accent, obviously, but he's still Yoda.
There's just something great. I don't know if him being in it came about because of him and Baker working together on Star Wars, but it's interesting that he's in this at all.
Yeah, because obviously, well, I would think it's more a Landis, or maybe this was the start of it, but, he's got kind of throwaway parts in Trading Places. He's like a police detective or something. He's booking Eddie Murphy at the beginning of Trading Places, and I think he's in another Landis movies too, as kind of a small part.
Good point. So who knows exactly how that came about, but he's
I'm guessing.
and, and I hear you on that. Like it's probably a scene that you could do without, but he does bring an interesting energy, and he's just
Yeah,
Frank Oz. So
yeah,
I'm
right.
terribly
And like I
biased.
said, I kind of prefaced it. Like, hate to say I didn't think it didn't come off right, but I don't know, it felt awkward.
Fair enough. So we talked about the ending. An interesting thing that strikes me there. Now, granted, this is very early '80s. But in that era, in both of these genres, I feel like endings almost always tried to set us up for a sequel, whether one happened or not. And this is like the opposite of that. Like
Oh,
it's hard to see.
where would you go from there? Which is great. You could always screenwrite something in, but your protagonists and your antagonists, I guess, are dead. I guess you got a leading lady there, but otherwise, it's like we've pretty wrapped up all the loose ends. So thanks.
And we kind of know from Griffin Dunn's dialogue that, at least according to him, that this is the last werewolf. Like, I guess they did successfully kill the other one. We're
Yeah.
supposed,
Yeah.
assume at that point. It's interesting to me, and maybe it's partially because it's 81. I wonder if this had been made in 84, if there would have been more of a push on him to say, hey, we need to set up, space for a sequel here.
Yeah, because I think to your point, it wasn't as pronounced in filmmaking at the time that you could make a movie and it didn't have to try and make a serial out of it, that it could just be a standalone production. But yeah, in today's world, they'd be cutting to some little werewolf in the corner, or, that's like, how? Like,
Right.
wait for number
But,
two.
some movies handle it okay to where it can just be a funny moment and doesn't have to lead to a sequel. But I try not to get too caught up in nostalgia, but there is something nice about a time when not everything had to be IP or extend into, genre fiction didn't have to be an 8-part thing.
Well, because again, you can come to a conclusion, which again, back to the hard stop, that it really is the end of the movie. You really have completed the narrative. It's not just a serial or a sitcom that you're watching on every Thursday. It really does have a beginning, middle, and end, which thematically makes for a stronger story, really. So
There's a reason it is the classic structure of human storytelling, right?
as old as time, that's what Joseph Campbell said.
Yeah, he knew a thing or two, I think.
Yeah.
We could cite him.
In most cases, a horror film or a comedy are the lightest of genres. They're usually not trying to delve into a person and their character. And this really does a little more. It really is getting to this person of dealing with the situation of what they are becoming and the personal anxiety and journey they're going through. So it is really a character study of this person in a way that most of those genres don't even try to attempt, to your point.
Very much so. What else? Anything else in your notes?
A couple of the other things you kind of covered, just some of the other fun scenes in it. I just love some of the jokes for whatever. Sometimes a joke just hits you and you just love the setup for it and just like what it's trying to accomplish. And so, like, there's a scene where he thinks he's going to turn a werewolf, so he tries to get himself arrested. And he tries to say the most offensive thing he could ever say to a English police officer. He says, like, the queen is a man, but then also Shakespeare's French is like, it's like, oh, the audacity is like, of course they're gonna just throw you in the pin right away for that. It's just the most horrible thing ever. I don't know why that one just really hit me between the eyes, but I just love that one. And actually, that was like, for a long time, I had my email address was a variant of that, just because I thought it was so funny.
Shakespeare's French slays me.
Yeah, I know. It's just like, it's great. It's great.
It's such a great culture clash moment. And I feel like this movie doesn't overplay its hand on that, but it's such a great moment of, if you walk up to a New York City cop and you started insulting him,
Yeah.
you're going to get arrested or hit,
Yeah. But it's like, I've got to really antagonize his English pride. And again, it's in to your point, that juxtaposition, it's in back to, there's no surprises. It's in the title, An American Werewolf in London. There's a culture class already kind of embedded in it.
We've talked about the porn theater scene, which is within the whole final sequence, but we haven't really talked about the final sequence as a whole. And that scene with the cop is almost a kickoff to the third act, which is then just super propulsive.
Yeah, I feel like at that point, it breaks out of where it was this kind of crossover genre. It becomes a straight ahead horror film at that time. It's moving to the conclusion of the confrontation with the monster. And again, even though it's flipped on its head, you're still rooting for the monster. It's following the track. It's doing all the natural things. He gets locked out of the room. The moon starts to change. You hear the transformation. All that stuff happens. And then he's being chased into the corner. And then they've got the last chance at redemption, but then he just gets shot. And you think there's a chance that maybe something good will happen, but the end is the end. And I'm not going to ruin it. Well, I guess I already did ruin it for it, but it's a 40-year-old movie. So, almost.
I warn people up front that this is not a spoiler-free space, because to me, you can't, the kind of conversations we want to have here, you can't dance around what's important in a movie. I haven't been to England as much as you, but I have been to London. As many of our listeners know, since a lot of listeners are friends, I'm a huge Arsenal FC fan, so we have been over to see them. But I love that being set in Piccadilly Circus and just kind of knowing what a filmmaking feat that has to be to accomplish
Oh,
that in
jeez.
that kind of
Trying to get
area.
people out of there. But
I read that they only had about 6 hours over 2 nights, and they only actually stopped traffic twice for about 3 minutes each in order to do the bus scene. So, like,
oh,
they were really
that's
having to
amazing.
shoot around a lot. Yeah.
And those are good scenes. Like I said, I kind of give a little grief to some of the werewolf scenes. That part holds up pretty well, and the special effect. I mean, that's a good scene. Though if you'd watch today, it still I think holds up pretty well.
Well, and it sounds like for what you're saying, it's probably more werewolf shots than werewolf scenes that you really
Yeah.
have issue with. And I hear you on that. You know, that when you try to show it happens, and look, you mentioned Jaws early on. It happens in Jaws too. When we see too much of Bruce the Shark,
Yeah.
it looks a little cheesy, you know?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. But it's kind of famous with the history of that movie that like the scary elements, and this is true the same in this movie, where what is really scary is not knowing and not seeing. So the shots, the straight on square shots of the main characters, that's the frightening thing because you can't see what's happening beyond the scene.
Yeah, and I think about the escalator scene, and yes, the shot of the wolf's cheesy, but that shot of him on the escalator where he's laying down and
Yeah.
the camera's zooming in on him is a pretty incredible shot that I haven't seen its exact parallel in many places.
And it's no, again, the setup is good. Yeah, my only gripe would be it's got the everything to make you feel this feeling of total defeat and loss that you've been like, he's got you basically. But then you see what's down there. It's like, I think you could outrun that. That doesn't look that bad. You can just get up and run, buddy. Come on.
So let me ask you, for fans of this movie, or maybe people who are checking it out for the first time, what are some other movies you'd recommend?
So it's a weird, just for that reason, that when you think about the Venn diagram of it's two separate genres at once, and there aren't many movies that sit in the middle of those two circles. So a movie that is both true to being a horror movie and a comedy at the same time. The one you would jump out like a Young Frankenstein. It's really not that. That's something different. The only thing I think is even close to embracing both is Shaun of the Dead. And that one's more to the comedy side, but it at least embraces some of the real fear elements of a zombie movie. So I'd say Shaun of the Dead is probably the closest proximity that I would say, go watch that if you like this.
I hear you. A couple I thought about. An interesting one, I think. The first two Evil Dead movies, especially if you watch both of them, because the first one more leans horror and the second more leans comedy. But I think the Evil Dead's around the same year. I think I don't know exactly, but I think it's right in that range. And then just on the makeup, just on the kind of wild transformation effects, The Thing came to mind.
Yeah, that's a good one.
But I think maybe some John Carpenter stuff in general. He does some similar things.
If you're wanting to pick one or either side, both from a comedy or otherwise, within that movie, you could just as easily recommend The Blues Brothers if you're looking at one aspect. Because the comedy, I feel like, is really top notch. Like the jokes and the setups are really as good as any of his other movies. So that part is really strong too. It's not just a horror movie, I guess is what I'm saying.
Honestly, there's a lot of places people could hear about the latest new movies. I prefer if we can introduce people to things.
The point I want to get across to listeners is American Werewolf in London. A lot of good memories for me. And if somebody could just watch that and have one experience with it the way I did watching it in college on a quiet night, that was a great experience. And if someone else can have something similar, hopefully they can.
All right, man. Well, I think that is a great note to end on. So I want to thank you so much for being here, for taking the time to do this. I can't honestly say see you next Wednesday, Paul, but I can say see you next Thursday.
There you go.
I asked the stars to ask the moon.
That's it for this one, folks. Hope you survived the scares. I'm Brad Glazer. I host, produce, and edit the show. Julia Mott is my co-producer. The music you heard at the beginning of the show and are hearing now is by Richard Bates and his band, The Huns. That's Hons, from their great album, To Skyward. You can find the Huns music on Bandcamp. We're going to 2 shows a week on a trial basis. I've got a lot of great interviews in the can, and I'm impatient for y'all to hear them. So this weekend, be on the lookout for our Black Panther episode with my friend LaNija Redmond. Please follow, rate, review, subscribe, all the things. You can follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky at Your Favorite Flick, on Letterboxd at Favorite Flick, or shoot us an email at yourfavoriteflick@gmail.com. Huns, take us out.
Success.